All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's event, The Future of the Modern Data Stack Predictions 2023 and Beyond. I have Taylor McGrath here today. She's the VP of Data Labs at Rivery.io and the right person to talk about this topic with. So welcome, everybody. Welcome, Taylor.
Thank you.
Hi. Everybody in the chat, if you have questions, comments, put it in the chat. We're going to go over the comments when they come in. So we're not going to wait until the end. We're going to do them directly. And yeah, I already see a few people here. Mirgadir and Vivek. Hi. Ogo. Hello. Welcome. Yeah. Taylor, nice that you're here. Can you maybe give us a quick introduction about yourself, about Rivery?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm Taylor McGrath. Currently, I work at a company called Rivery, which I'll talk a little bit about. My role currently is I cover all data solutions that we provide to customers, prospects, partners, etc. And Rivery itself is a SaaS data operations platform. So that encompasses the data operation needs from end to end, covering data ingestion, transformation, data activation, like sending data back to operational systems, and then the orchestration that ties all of those pipelines together. So this means that data management is simple and unified while remaining flexible. So easy to use and no-code UI, as well as more, I guess, developer-friendly options for programmatic use as well. I do have, I don't know if there's a quick image or, yeah. So this is just a very high-level overview of kind of what we do at Rivery data architecture-wise. So really, it's the platform that kind of encompasses all of these different pieces of what Andreas mentioned, like some people call the modern data stack, kind of in one place. So that's a very high-level overview of myself and Rivery. My background before Rivery was in the data services world, so working as a data analytics consultant on projects and all type of companies, kind of end to end. So standing up data warehouses, building custom connectors and pipelines, all the way to kind of the front end or data visualization that's served to end users.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we were talking about when I showed this image. You said that's basically the people are excited.
Yeah, the streets of London for you there, but yeah.
You said that represents also the modern data stack or parts of the modern data stack. Can you explain to people who might not be that deep into the modern data stack topic, how do you define this? How can people look at the modern data stack?
Yeah, I think the modern data stack, I guess most simply put, I think is a suite of existing products that, and the reason I'd say it's called modern versus what you might consider like a legacy data stack is the kind of one thing tying, I guess, all these products together is they provide some sort of data operation or functionality and are cloud native. Sorry, can you still hear me?
It's a bit the audio is a bit lower now.
Okay, I think I'm
still not that.
Oh,
it's very low. What you could do is you could, if you have problems with that, you could go into the settings menu below.
How's this? Is this better?
Everybody, can you hear Taylor?
Sorry,
because for me she's
kicked out.
She's very silent. Can you say something?
I'll try one more time. How's that?
It's
good.
It's not that much.
All right,
Taylor, let's so this is live. Let's quickly try something in the video in the where we are right now in the browser. There's a settings button, a settings icon below. You can click that.
go to the mic.
Is this better?
Say something? Taylor?
Yeah, is this better?
No.
No.
What you can do is when you go to audio, you can also automatically adjust mic volume. That's usually checked. You can manually modify the mic volume.
Okay. Okay. How about now? I'm put it all the way to the top.
Okay. First person says sounds good. A little better. It's
A little
better
better.
now. Okay.
I'll try to be really loud. Okay. Oh, good. Thanks. Thank you all. So yeah, the one thing I think ties all of these products together in the data world that is modern, so to speak, is that they are cloud native. So for some of these tools, they're completely fully managed, completely SaaS. Some of them are just cloud native in the sense where they can be installed and maintained on someone's private cloud. I think that's kind of the key that the word modern came about. And then kind of stack is because basically these, and like, we think about that image we just showed, they kind of all sit together in a technology stack that provides an overall data architecture, right, for a company or a specific use case or like domain inside of a company.
I saw this when I checked out your Rivery's website, because you have basically all the important things in there, right? You have data integration, how you can get data from the sources, which is one of the big parts of the modern data stack. And you have the ELT processes, the transformations, and so on, which are super important. And if you have this on the cloud, software as a service, that's really where a lot of people are going, right?
Yeah, and I think the reason it came about, or the transformation that really happened, was when these technologies were coming out as cloud native. And I think really like the storage, the data warehouse world was probably the first to do it. You saw like the growth of tools like first Redshift, and then eventually BigQuery, Snowflake, Databricks, and then kind of on top of these new age tools that like made for much better, like much lower barriers to entry, much more scalability in terms of growth of data volumes and velocities. There were all these kind of other categories, right, that products were built around. So that's the ingestion, getting data into these storage areas, transforming the data itself, monitoring and like data observability, governance on top of that, and then ultimately how you're serving it to end users in the form of BI. And then now more recently you hear like data activation or reverse ETL, where actually the data warehouse is being used as more of a control center, and that source of truth is where you send data back into operational systems, right, where actual actions are being taken place by business users.
Yeah.
Why do you think that started with the data warehouse or with analytical data stores?
I think that was the first place where there was kind of revolutionary technology there, and like the separation of storage and compute, I think was, and I'm really talking mostly about like, I guess Snowflake and BigQuery here were kind of the first in that area. I think really changed the game in terms of, okay, this doesn't have to be a fully single cloud operation where we're just spinning up an instance or an EC2, downloading software to it, and then every time we want to scale out or scale up, it means bigger hardware, like bigger machines. Yeah, so I think building a SaaS building SaaS on top of that for like an essential thing, something as essential as data storage, and allowing for SQL operations on top of it, I think really sped up the innovation in other data categories.
Are you seeing that demand for those solutions basically on top of the warehouse, that these are still growing and keep growing and being it's almost like the primary use case? A lot of people use that as the...
Yeah, I I think what we saw in 2021 and 2022 was a huge growth in all of these areas. And I think a lot of these like data categories, I'd say, got very saturated, right? Where you can look up like data ingestion tool and you'll see like 50, like literally 50 different tools that can help you get data from, Salesforce to Snowflake or something. So I think it's very saturated in what that does. And also it got very narrow in terms of categories, right? In terms of this is a data catalog. Well, this one's for lineage. Well, this one's for governance. Well, this one's for, so there's a tool for everything. And so I think naturally what like cyclical in the data market, which I think we'll start to see, maybe not just this year, but the next few years, is sort of consolidation of all of these categories into kind of tools that can encompass more than just one or two things, and kind of have a stack within a stack, or a lot more flexibility, I think, in what companies are provided with as their options for, I guess, at least the buy part of data architecture options.
It seems like that's what Rivery is already doing, like putting a lot of things that would be individual tools into one platform, right?
Definitely. And I think that's there's a lot of value there in terms of kind of having like a centralized platform or hub for these data operations. But I think what's important there is that there still remains flexibility to use other tools for other things if that's what's desired, right? I think what's a careful thing is like, being either like, the full one-stop shop that's like, maybe okay at everything versus, what we've seen over the past couple of years, which is these best of breed things in very small categories. And I think the key is like, how do you find that perfect middle ground to where data teams, can rely on, a smaller amount of technologies to do more. And they also understand that the data architecture they have, let's say if a new use case comes up in a month, in a year, whatever, that they're confident that the solution they have is flexible enough to where kind of they can connect to anything, transform anything. So I think it's yes, the full functionality, and Rivery is an example of, we take different categories or functionalities in the data operations world and kind of offer that full end-to-end. But it's also important to stay super flexible to integrate with other best of breed tools out there, so that essentially the buyer or the companies are kind of in control of how they can piece together these stacks, so to speak.
Yeah, but I can't see why it might be good to have more under one umbrella, because like there were in the chat, we already had somebody mention DBT. You mentioned Snowflake. So people were coming on, you set up DBT, you set up Snowflake, you get yourself a data integration tool, then you need Airflow and everything, and then you already have 4, 5, 6 tools. Governance and everything.
Mixtures of open source with SaaS, with just cloud native, and then all of these have different pricing models and are it's hard enough to predict kind of the scalability and growth of a single pricing model, let alone stringing together 5 or 6 of them, especially in more turbulent times in a market. So I think there's areas where there's a lot less risk, right, to kind of pull things together. But I do think, especially technical people, you always have that fear that, okay, well, I know I have limits, right, to what certain tech can do, and I want to be able to do anything if said use case comes up. So I think we kind of see it from both sides, but yeah.
There was a question here, or a comment. What bothers me is seeing cloud providers oversaturate themselves. It seems like companies like AWS reinvent their own product multiple times, complicating your choices. Right. So that, do you see that also? Is that a danger?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge part of the saturation, of course, is like you have the big three cloud providers, have a solution for everything. And I think there's sometimes hard choices to be made there that are, kind of prevent you from being cloud agnostic. If there's only certain limitations that they can connect to. I do think like there is a merge happening in terms of you'll see like, marketplaces out there where, Snowflake as an example, right, is cloud agnostic in itself, where it can run on top of any of the major cloud players. So I think it's just a matter of kind of company to company understanding, how much, like, what's your bottom line? How much does it mean to you to kind of use the tools within the cloud that you're on? If you're already multi-cloud, it may make sense or be pertinent that you do something that is agnostic. But totally, I think Google's another example. I think they have like 5 different ways or 5 different services to like transform data.
Yeah, and it makes it very complicated. Otherwise, if you have a platform that does that very very clearly, or that explains very clearly, you use this and this works. It works like with the same tool, not just in 3, 4, 5 different ways. That's a big plus, right? There was also from Data Nerd here. Please say something about the full stack data scientist. I think that also ties in a bit to the people who are using these platforms, these tools in the modern data stack, right? That it's not that the scientist who wants to do some analytics can work easier with the platforms, or it's
totally.
simple.
I think the first thing people kind of think of when I think of modern data stack is you think of the data engineers, you think of the analytics engineers that are kind of covering one or multiple of those like key operations of data. But I think the data scientist touches a lot of that as well. Data scientists, they depend on prepped data with good quality, but sometimes that's there's not necessarily like a full-fledged team of engineers to do that for them. So a lot of times they have to get in the weeds and like prep their own data for the models that they're trying to productionize. So I think there's a lot of crossover with like the data engineering role for many data scientists. And so I think the stack is just as pertinent there in terms of, being able to, one, get data and then model it so that you can have clean quality data to run whatever models you should run. But
yeah, it's some people say, oh, well, data engineering is going to die off because everything is going to be automated, and with these platforms the scientist is going to do everything. But I still don't see it. I still see good value in good engineering, value, as you said, in good data integration, good preparation. But the cool thing is that platforms like yours or any other who are taking care of, for instance, data integration, makes the job easier for the engineers, because you, as an engineer, you don't want to go and integrate the 10th database and develop some stupid thing again and again and again, and just have a nice way of integrating data or transforming data.
Yeah, definitely.
What's coming in here? Very quickly. What are the questions you ask or the details you need to design an infrastructure pipeline for data migration? So in the modern data stack, or coming from your products, data migration, how do you see this?
Yeah, so I think the details you'd need, one is you need to understand the sources you're migrating from, because I think there's differences if that's a transactional database versus something stored maybe in a file system versus a REST API. And from there, I think there are like different pathways. So there's one for like, I'll say, migrating that you want to continue to sync daily. Let's say you have like a transactional or an operational database that has all of your company's transactions, and you want to sync this every day, maybe hourly to Snowflake. So those are going to be syncs that you have to understand the sync frequency, the structure of the data. If you want to use something like CDC or change data capture and actually pull from the logs of the database, or just do some incremental load from the tables itself. So understanding like the resources that's going to put on the database itself. But then there's kind of a different sort of migration where you're actually migrating off of maybe an older legacy analytical database, like maybe you're using Oracle in the past, and now you want to use Snowflake. So I think data migration is like a wide word that we use, when sometimes it just means, oh, I want to use my operational data for analytics in a new age cloud data warehouse. Some of it is like a true migration from what I used to consider my old data warehouse to now a new data warehouse. And the latter, I think, is a little more intensive, because not only do you have to kind of migrate data, but you have to migrate pipelines. So I think there's two different things there. And then also just with, we put databases aside, with things like REST APIs, I think it's understanding, are these standard data sources that I'm trying to connect to? Is it, the Salesforces, the NetSuites of the world, where it's, a certain kind of set of ingestion options that I have for build or buy? Or are they more like long tail sources, like maybe less common APIs that I need to understand? Okay, is it worth maintaining custom Python code by one of my data engineers, or do we pay someone to do this for us, or is there some easy mechanism where basically we can just take our API docs and kind of match them to a more like no code, low code experience, and kind of build this ourselves? So I think it's understanding like the data you need to connect to, and what the full fledged of that migration is, if it includes also migrating legacy pipelines.
You mentioned no code, low code, because it used to be very difficult to create good pipelines. We had a lot of tools. You needed to do a lot of coding, a lot of setup. Like, how is it with Rivery? I'm guessing you are also, or can you do most within the UI, or do you have to do the coding?
Yeah, good question. So we have, I think over 200 native connectors at this point. So those are native connectors actually managed and maintained by our product, our development teams. So those are like all the kind of key database, NoSQL databases, business applications, file store systems, etc. And then what I think is really nice and a bit of a differentiator is we have a like a REST API kind of custom connector, but this is very, I'd say, low code, where you're plugging and playing all the different pieces of what would be like a curl command, let's say, if you're building your own with Python or something. And there's kind of full capability to build these custom connectors yourself, orchestrate them without ever coding anything. And so I think that is really, kind of what can scale and what can give, technical data engineers kind of more confidence that if something new comes up in terms of, some REST API they have to connect to that isn't a common connector that like is just off the shelf somewhere, then it's a super quick, and kind of code-free build.
That's cool. Yeah, because that's the strength of SaaS tools. That's the strength of modern data tools. And I really love that. That's, for me, if I choose something, if I choose a platform, that would be my number one thing. Can this be easily maintained? Can this easily be implemented code-wise? Because you don't want to struggle through that, and you need a lot of experts in this. We were talking about a lot about data integration, and so how, when we think about ETL was always a big part of the platform, right? How do you see the future of ETL? Like,
that's a good question. I think, over the last 10 years or so, ETL kind of transformed into more real ELT, really. I'd say is much more common now, at least for most use cases, where it's kind of, okay, let's dump all of our raw data in its raw state into our data warehouse, because now these tools can kind of handle that amount of data and those different kind of varieties of data types. And then let's do all of our transformations there. So we're doing the EL first and then the T to kind of create the data model within the same place it's stored, really, in its raw state, to have kind of all of that in one place. But I think what we've seen kind of happen, especially in 2022, is one, we have a very saturated market of ingestion players. And then two, we have some of the bigger players, like a good example is like Salesforce and Snowflake. So Salesforce came out with basically a native kind of data integration of, I think, their CDP product directly to Snowflake. So what that means is all of this like saturated ingestion market that's built a Salesforce CDP connector to Snowflake really isn't relevant anymore, right? Because people can just do that directly. They don't have to build the pipelines. And I think we're seeing it on the opposite end with data activation in some cases too, where you have these new companies, softwares that are actually built on top of the data warehouse. So what that means is, let's say it's a marketing, like an email campaign platform, and it's built on top of Snowflake. And there's one I'm thinking of, but I can't think of the name right now, but built on top of Snowflake. And what that means is it's already native. So when I'm trying to create a custom audience or a custom segment of my users, it's actually directly querying some table I already have in my data warehouse and using that to then, personalize, let's say, an email campaign out to prospects. What that means is I don't have to build the reverse ETL pipeline to send all this like account level or contact level data into some external system, because it's already sitting right on top of my data warehouse. So I think, I don't think it's going to come anywhere close to making ingestion or data activation companies extinct. I just think users or buyers are going to have a lot more optionality, flexibility in what they're doing. I think it's going to put pressure on these products, Rivery included, to be flexible, right? To be able to kind of accommodate all of these different options and to still provide that value.
Yeah, well, from what I have seen, and like you are in a bit of a better place because you're not focused on just like data integration. Like we've seen here already talks in the chat, like don't use Fivetran, use Melando or Airbyte. Like as you said, it's really saturated and people are discussing which one is better and better. But if you're on very various points of the whole pipeline, of the whole platform, then that's that's a more flexible, a better position than just focusing on the one. I really like that. Salesforce, Snowflake. Do you think so? You said there's going to be more built on top of the warehouse. Like, is that one of your main predictions? What you see is going to be happening 2023, especially?
I mean, it's already starting to happen for sure. I think if you look at kind of the main tools right now that people are reverse ETLing back to, it's a lot of like, I can at least speak to what we do internally at Rivery. We're sending like account level data, like usage data, properties back to Intercom, to Heap for product analytics. So tools like this, if you have a product analytics tool or something like Intercom, which is kind of like a full kind of communication tool, I guess, that would sit on top of your product, and they're already natively built on top of where you're storing your data, your control center or your source of truth, then it removes a whole piece of the puzzle, right, that's needed for maintenance, like that whole pipeline that is first curating this data, getting it into the format that we can send to Intercom's API or Heap's API, which is, more kind of SQL and data wrangling, and then actually performing this and, making sure it's at whatever daily cadence or whatever cadence there. So you can kind of strip all of that away from kind of the umbrella of things that your data engineers are having to maintain. And I think it's a huge value prop for those companies. And I think the companies like Snowflakes and Databricks recognize this, and I think are building for that as well. Like Snowflake came out with something they're calling, I forget what it's called now. It's something like it starts with a U, but it's their kind of offering for, in additional to having like analytical OLAP type tables, to have operational, more like OLTP type functionality as well. So I think what they're trying to do is to become, we can be an operational database for you, or like transactional in your product that you're going to build on top of us. But we can also still cover all those analytical, like internal use cases too, with our like existing product. But
that's interesting, because that's usually the problem. You need to have an analytical data store and a transactional, because there's no real fit that, or one thing that does everything, that does both. That would actually be really cool. I think also the jobs are going to change then, right? That they also from the standpoint of the data engineer or of the data teams, that because you're not only working on setting up pipelines or doing manual coding for transformations and so on, that there is going to be a more demand towards other jobs, right?
yeah.
How do you see that? Do you see something like an analytics engineer emerging, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I think really it was kind of coined by DBT, the term analytics engineer, but it's really intersection of like a traditional data engineer with a traditional data analyst, let's say. It's like this area, this gray area in the middle is now what companies are calling and hiring for an analytics engineer. And really it's a person that kind of lives, I'd say, mostly in a data warehouse, kind of curating data sets that can then be used downstream by data analysts or the business. So ensuring, one, that they kind of answer whatever business use case need, two, the quality of these data sets and optimization of kind of the queries that create them. So it's a mixture of kind of principles that have been instilled in data engineers for a while, but also still understanding kind of the business context, what's been more on the data analytics plate for a while. And I think it's going to bring a revolution actually to more of the intersection between like the warehouse and the BI space, I think is where that's going to happen in the next few years. So here things like a metrics layer or a semantic layer, where really it's in that kind of empty space between where you have like your dashboards and reporting tools, and then you have where the data is coming from. It's the business logic, I think, is what's going to be important, where you have maybe more data generalists, data savvy business users really understand where their data is coming from, ask their own questions, not have to wait for a dashboard or a report to be built. I think that's it's a big area, because I think we have some really big like incumbent BI tools like Tableau, Power BI, Looker, etc. And so I think the kind of next wave is going to be around, I think, newer players with focus on a semantic layer of sorts.
I personally, I'm not that hyped about the name analytics engineer, because, as you said, it's a lot of stuff that engineers already do. Just because it's no longer ETL, the transformation needs to happen then once it's in your data store, and so that's something that the engineer can do. And very often, and I've talked with a few analysts that are in my academy, and they said they struggle with that because they don't have the engineering knowledge. They want to gain that, but often they don't even have the opportunity to work on the data sets right now, because somebody is going to prepare them either through an ETL job or then within the data warehouse, but the analyst doesn't really have a choice and needs to ask, can somebody fix this or something? So let's see if the analytics, but I generally agree I agree to what you see. We most likely have to level up towards the towards, let's say, the business side, towards understanding the business needs,
Yeah.
and then
I mean, ultimately, that's what it's all about, right? Is like, all this modern data stack, whatever. But it's like, really, what are we really trying to do? And it's, move the needle, whatever company, right? We're working for, and bring value in some way. So I think the analytics engineer, it probably differs company to company what, if you're an analytics engineer, you actually do, either on the analysis side or deeper into the engineering side. But yeah, I think it's kind of like we have these natural silos or divides that happen with people that are like head down in the code, in the data, which now they don't have to be as much, right? Because we have like some tools that can help make their lives easier there. So yeah, I think the more natural way things will move is someone with the data engineering skill set will actually move more into understanding the business side of things, because they don't necessarily have to code in Python a connector and maintain that all the time anymore, because it's maintained with some sort of software.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Because it was for a long time very easy as an engineer. You prepared the data and then you dropped it in, and then you say, okay, somebody else. Oh. So I think you're right. That's going to change. That's also something that I have to, in a long term, for my own academy, have to adapt to that. Right? That's you with your product, to actually enable engineers, enable scientists to do that, and then the education for people as well. What's that? Zero ETL is very new in the game too. What's zero ETL? You know that?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I think it was announced or coined AWS recently. But basically, it's like the idea of zero data replication. So kind of everything happens at the source. Really, is where instead of bringing data to the tech, you're bringing tech to the data. I do think 100%. I think that we will see, maybe not early this year. And I think some of the things we talked about earlier, even with like things built on top of a data warehouse, or these native data sharing that companies are building with one another, I think are definitely going in that direction, right? Where we're bringing tech to data instead of bringing data to tech. And zero ETL is, I think, the culmination of that. But I agree. I think it's very early. It's new to the game.
Yeah, it's very often companies have this idea, we're going to bring that out, this is going to work, and maybe for a few use cases that will be really good, and it will come very, very slowly, but it's not most likely not going to be that revolution.
But I think like with a company like AWS, the big cloud ones, we mentioned they have all these services for everything. It's going to, some stuff like this will be spearheaded, I think, by the really large players, because what they can do is just package together all these services they already have and say like, listen, it's already, we're doing all this against what you already have stored in an S3 bucket or something, right? And we don't actually have to move it, because you don't have to move it into another cloud. You don't have to move it into another system. So yeah, I think that's maybe an angle that the larger players are taking to kind of keep up with the rest of these like new products. But yeah.
There was also one before that was a bit technical, bit engineering topic here. Do you see, from Mahmoud, do you see the future of how do you see the future of containerization, distributed data and processing platforms? So how do you see this? Because with SaaS,
yeah, I mean, SaaS naturally, is very modular. It's like multi-tenant, containerized, right? Like, at least from what I know, at least at high level of our like our backend architecture at Rivery, like we have multi-tenancy, and even within accounts, there's kind of walls that we can make in terms of multi-tenants. And when a pipeline is run at any point, is executed, it's spun up in some sort of container infrastructure, containerized infrastructure. But I think where where there's going to be even more evolution is with, let's say, with really large data loads for these big migrations. Even if you have it containerized at the execution level of a single pipeline, there could be terabytes of data in there. So how do you actually scale that out within just a single execution and then bring it back all together if you want to do some operation like an upsert merge into a table that already exists? So, and I think these are things that, like, I know are I'm only giving this example because I know things our engineers are thinking about and working on. So,
yeah, but as you explained, that's more that everything gets more to the cloud provider side and less to the end user. Like there is this shift that as a user, you don't have to care about these things because the platform you're on is going to take care of it, and they are going to use containerization and they're going to worry about distributing the data and the
you
processing.
Don't have to worry. you don't even have to know what a container is.
Yeah. That's as a company who's coming in, has a use case and wants to solve that use case, it's less of an issue anymore. There is the one thing, and that's actually, Pavan added this here, that's actually a very good question. And sometimes I ask myself that, how to get the leadership to buy into constantly evolving modern data stack, or the constantly evolving the stack, because that's not easy, right? There's constantly something new happening. You, at some point, most likely you need to focus on something like, okay, now we're going to use Rivery, and how do you say that or how do you convince the leadership go with that, and that's going to be our choice for the next 5 years? And like, how do you see that?
Well, it's a big question, but I think it comes back to the value. So as a data leader, let's say, I think it's your responsibility to understand how other, like, business leaders in your company think, what moves the needle for them. If we're talking dollars, we're talking some other metric that is value to your company, time saving, et cetera. This is going to be a huge year, I think, because of the market we're in, for how do we optimize cost of what we're doing? How, what does this mean in terms of dollars, in terms of headcount, of who's needed to support this? So I think it's a little bit of understanding the language they're speaking and how you can relate the tech change that you want to make, that will be more flexible, more scalable, et cetera, and turn that into a metric that they care about.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because only that people understand. Like you cannot come with technical things like, oh, this will going to save or we're going to be easier in engineering, and will, with technical terms, leadership's not going to care. But if you say, okay, this is going to save us time, this is going to save us money in fees to the platform, this is going to save us some people, which is not good, but that's what's happening right now. As you mentioned, I was just researching.
Or save people's time. Maybe not some people, but save their time to focus on other things.
Necessarily, that's what everybody's doing right now. We see Amazon is letting go of, I don't know how many thousands of people, and this year is it's going to be a difficult year, I'm guessing.
I know, and unfortunately, I think a lot of the leadership that as a data team you'd be, they're thinking much more short term, right, than they would be in another market, where if it's a market of a steady market or something growing, you're thinking 5-10 years ahead, because everything is great right now. But if it's a market like it is today, you're thinking, okay, well, what's this going to give us in 3 months and 6 months? So I think the returns are much, people are expecting things much faster, even in terms of optimization and cost savings. So that's,
But on the other side, when it comes up again, then people are going to invest again, and they're going to focus more on it's always the same.
It's a cycle. Yeah, it will. It will. And we feel like every time it's like, why didn't we see this coming? Why are we so? But
that's true. I actually was when Elon fired a lot of engineers, I was like, huh? how does that make sense? Because without engineering, but most likely it's going to be some future things that they wanted to do. And
Yeah.
do we have any other? I don't know, because data custodian, I see here. There are all these names coming up, like data steward, data custodian. Like, how do you see that with these? Is this really necessary if you have these new platforms? If you have a modern data stack where it's easy to do things that you can actually, you don't actually need these things. You could actually go without with an engineer or a scientist. And then how do you see this?
I think you still need, like, the tech is just, I think, a tool, right, to make lives easier of these people, right, of the data engineers, scientists, analysts. Like, I think, sure, at a large scale, maybe at a huge enterprise organization, it means less people, because in the past those would just be people doing very manual things that now are no longer manual. But I think there's a human aspect of translating actual data points into a story, into insights, into whatever business KPIs. And I think that that's what I don't think at risk, at least currently, to these technologies. I think data custodian, steward, they're names for those roles. There's how do we bring what these data points are from all these different places that we've put together, and kind of translate that into insights or whatever we're serving to the business. So I think they're fun, fancy names, but really it's that intersection that I still think is like kind of an empty space, right? Like, you have your data warehouse, which, let's say it is your source of truth. Let's say this is the ideal state is it's a trusted source of truth. You have a data model that people work with and trust. And then you have dashboards or reports built on top of that. But then what, right? Like, then there's a business user. It's like, oh, this is great, but what if I have these 4 more questions? What do they do then? Then it kind of becomes your data team as professional services, right? Which is not ideal. You want to, how do we get it to really, really the point where business users can answer their own questions? And the next step of that, which is being proactive or predictive. But
yeah, I think there is the jobs are going to, as you said, you need a lot of roles to do this, and there is change within that. And sometimes I think too much about, like, people say, or people come to me often to talk about full stack data scientists and so on. Yeah, it's nice in theory. Is that practical? Yeah. Okay. Taylor, I think we discussed a lot of topics today.
Yeah. I flew by. Yeah.
50 minutes in there. Yeah, that really flew by. I hope you had fun. It was awesome that you were here, that we could talk about these topics. I hope people in the chat learned something. Let me know if you learned something. And give Taylor a follow on LinkedIn. Get in touch with her if you have questions about these topics, question about Rivery.
Absolutely. Any questions we didn't get to, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, ping me. Yeah.
Okay, cool that you're going to help. And thanks everybody. Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a good day, and see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.